Federation starships are understood as monuments to exploration. Smooth hulls, balanced nacelles, open saucer sections with windows facing outward. The visual language communicates curiosity, openness, peaceful intent. These vessels are designed to inspire rather than intimidate, to suggest diplomacy rather than dominance. This is the official story. The design philosophy is framed as a reflection of Federation values, where form follows idealism and every curve expresses hope for the galaxy. The official story is incomplete. Federation starship design is not shaped by idealism, it is shaped by constraint. Every hull configuration, every nacelle placement, every saucer diameter reflects a negotiation between competing institutional pressures inside Starfleet itself. Exploration mandates collide with defensive requirements. Treaty obligations limit weapons placement. Political signaling determines visibility profiles. The ships that emerge are not expressions of optimism. They are compromises between what the Federation claims to be and what it must prepare for. The silhouettes read as reassurance, but the mechanism beneath is deterrence management, resource allocation under scarcity, and doctrinal hedging against threats the Federation refuses to name publicly. The shape of a starship is the shape of a decision tree under pressure. Starfleet operates under a dual mandate. The organization is chartered as an exploration and scientific body. Diplomatic first contact, survey missions, humanitarian relief, scientific research at the frontier. This is the mission profile encoded into every academy class, every officer's oath, every public address by Federation leadership. But the same organization maintains the only deep space military capability the Federation possesses. Starfleet vessels are armed. They patrol borders. They respond to invasions. They enforce blockades. They engage hostile powers in sustained combat across multiple theaters. The contradiction is structural. One institution is expected to behave as a peaceful research fleet while simultaneously functioning as the primary deterrent against galactic-scale military aggression. This creates a design problem with no clean solution. A pure exploration vessel optimizes for endurance, scientific instrumentation, crew comfort, and diplomatic presentation. It carries minimal armament, prioritizes lab space over tactical systems, and designs its profile to appear non-threatening. A pure warship optimizes for firepower concentration, armor distribution, tactical maneuverability, and damage control. It sacrifices habitation space, reduces crew amenities, and shapes its silhouette to minimize targeting profiles and maximize weapon arcs. Starfleet cannot build either. Every vessel must serve both functions. The result is not a hybrid. It is a platform where every design choice is a trade-off, where adding one capability means accepting vulnerability in another, and where the final form reflects which institutional pressure won the internal argument during that ship class's development cycle. The Constitution class establishes the template: primary hull separated from engineering section, warp nacelles elevated on pylons away from the main body, saucer section wide and visible, housing the majority of crew spaces and bridge. This configuration is not arbitrary. The saucer placement maximizes habitable volume while keeping critical systems distributed across multiple hull segments. If the engineering hull is destroyed, the saucer can separate and maintain life support, impulse power, and short-range defensive capability. The nacelle separation reduces warp field interference with habitation areas and isolates antimatter containment from crew sections. If a nacelle is destroyed, the ship can continue at reduced warp capability rather than losing all faster than light travel. This is damage control architecture disguised as aesthetic balance. The shape communicates peace while engineering for survivability. During the original 5-year mission of the Enterprise under Kirk, the ship encounters hostile action more than 40 times: Klingon engagements, Romulan incursions, Gorn standoffs, Tholian entanglements, encounters with species wielding planet-killing weapons, automated defense systems from extinct civilizations, and spatial anomalies capable of tearing the ship apart. The Constitution class survives these encounters not through superior firepower, but through redundancy. When the Enterprise loses primary power in multiple engagements, auxiliary systems sustain life support long enough for repairs. When nacelles are damaged, the ship continues at impulse. When the saucer takes direct hits, the engineering hull compensates. The design is not optimized to win battles. It is optimized to survive them long enough to disengage, repair, or negotiate. This is the doctrine Starfleet does not advertise. Exploration vessels are expected to operate alone, beyond support range, in regions where reinforcement is impossible. If a Constitution class encounters a superior force, it cannot call for backup. It cannot retreat to a starbase. It must endure, adapt, or withdraw under fire. The distributed architecture enables this, but it also creates a visibility problem. A Constitution class is large. Its saucer section is a wide, flat target visible at extreme range. Its nacelles glow with plasma emissions that can be detected across light years. Its profile is unmistakable. This is not an accident. The Federation needs its ships to be seen. A vessel operating near the neutral zone or patrolling the Klingon border must be recognizable as a Starfleet presence. It must signal capability without overt aggression. It must be visible enough to deter opportunistic raids, but non-threatening enough to avoid triggering preemptive strikes. The shape is a diplomatic statement before the crew says a word. The Treaty of Organia forces the issue into sharper focus. The agreement prohibits the Federation and the Klingon Empire from engaging in direct warfare. Enforcement is absolute, imposed by beings with the power to disable entire fleets. The treaty does not ban military vessels. It does not ban territorial expansion. It bans open conflict. This shifts the calculus. Starfleet can no longer design ships solely around combat effectiveness. Every vessel must now operate in a legal and political environment where appearing too aggressive risks treaty violation accusations, where every border encounter is scrutinized by neutral parties, and where Klingon propaganda will seize on any design element that can be framed as militaristic escalation. The result is visible in the next generation of ship classes. The Miranda class reduces the saucer profile. The Oberth class minimizes armament visibility. The Excelsior class introduces sleeker lines and more integrated nacelle housing. Each iteration reduces the visual language of aggression while maintaining or increasing actual combat capability. The ships begin to look less like warships and more like luxury liners with teeth. This creates an intelligence problem for Starfleet's adversaries. A smooth, elegant hull profile with large viewports and a visible bridge module suggests a lightly armed science vessel. But the same platform mounts photon torpedo launchers, phaser arrays, and shields capable of sustaining prolonged bombardment. The Reliant ambushes the Enterprise in the Mutara Nebula. The ship class looks identical to exploration configurations. Khan assumes the Enterprise is equally matched. He is wrong. The Enterprise, later demonstrates that Constitution refit vessels carry enough firepower to engage multiple opponents simultaneously. The design language deceives by understatement. It signals non-aggression while concealing military parity. This is not an accident. It is institutional policy expressed in hull geometry. The Romulan neutral zone reinforces the same pressure from a different angle. The treaty establishing the zone prohibits Federation outposts on the Romulan side and bans Romulan incursions into Federation space. It does not ban patrols. It does not ban sensor monitoring. It does not ban shows of force, provided they remain on the legal side of the boundary. Starfleet stations vessels along the zone continuously. These ships must be visible to Romulan sensors. They must communicate presence without provocation. They must signal that the border is monitored, that incursions will be detected, and that response capability is immediate, all without appearing to mass for invasion. This requires a specific hull profile. Too small and the presence is dismissible. Too large and it reads as build-up. Too aggressive and it justifies Romulan countermeasures. Too passive and it invites testing. The shape becomes a calibrated signal in a language of strategic geometry. The Ambassador class and the Galaxy class take this to its logical extreme. Both classes are massive. Galaxy-class vessels displace more than 4 million metric tons. The saucer section alone houses more than 1,000 crew members, families included. The profile is enormous, visible, and deliberately non-threatening. The saucer curves are soft. The nacelles are swept back rather than thrust forward. The ship reads as a mobile city rather than a battleship. This communicates the Federation's self-image as a peaceful, expansive civilization. But the same platform mounts a weapons array capable of engaging Romulan warbirds, Cardassian cruisers, and Borg cubes. The Enterprise D destroys or disables hostile vessels dozens of times during its operational life. The Odyssey is destroyed by Jem'Hadar fighters in a single engagement, but only after sustaining damage that would have obliterated smaller vessels outright. The Galaxy class is not fragile. It is built to endure, to absorb damage across multiple hull sections, to protect its crew while maintaining offensive capability long enough to achieve tactical objectives. The size is the deterrent, the shape is the reassurance, and the lethality is the unspoken guarantee. But deterrence has costs. Every meter of hull plating is resource allocation. Every deck of crew quarters is space not used for torpedo storage. Every viewport is a structural weakness. Every family quarter is a potential casualty in combat. The Galaxy class embodies this tension in its most visible form. The ship is designed for long-duration exploration with families aboard. Children attend school on Deck 12. Civilians live in residential sections. Recreation facilities, arboretums, and holodecks occupy space that could house tactical systems. This is intentional. Starfleet's doctrine requires that exploration vessels remain habitable for years without resupply. Crew morale, psychological health, and family stability are treated as operational requirements, not luxuries. But the same doctrine places those families directly into combat zones. The Enterprise D engages Romulan vessels near the neutral zone with civilians aboard. It responds to Borg incursions with children in the saucer section. It participates in fleet actions during the Klingon Civil War without offloading non-essential personnel. This is not oversight. This is policy. The Federation refuses to maintain a separate warship fleet. Every deep space-capable vessel is dual-purpose. Every captain is both diplomat and warrior. Every ship carries families because separating exploration from habitation would require admitting that Starfleet is, functionally, a military organization. That admission would undermine the Federation's diplomatic positioning, alienate pacifist member worlds, and provide propaganda to rival powers. So the families stay aboard, and the design reflects this. Saucer sections are hardened, but not armored. Life support redundancy is prioritized, but not at the expense of scientific capability. Emergency separation systems are installed, but crew drills show that separation during combat is a last resort with low survival probability for the engineering section. The shape of the ship is the shape of an acceptable risk calculation. The Defiant class breaks the pattern by acknowledging it. The ship is small, the hull is angular, compact, armored. There are no families. No science labs beyond what tactical operations require. No diplomatic suites. No viewports in crew quarters. The Defiant is designed for one purpose: to fight the Borg. It mounts pulse phaser cannons, quantum torpedoes, and ablative armor. It is built to survive damage that would cripple a Galaxy class and to deliver firepower disproportionate to its size. It is, by any measure, a warship. Starfleet classifies it as an escort. The semantic distinction is political. Calling it a warship would validate decades of accusations from rival powers that Starfleet is a military force disguised as explorers. Calling it an escort allows the Federation to deploy dedicated combat vessels while maintaining the institutional fiction. But the Defiant also exposes the costs of that fiction. The ship is cramped, uncomfortable, and exhausting for extended deployments. Crew quarters are minimal. There is no space for recreation, for families, for the habitation infrastructure that makes long-duration missions sustainable. The Defiant can fight, but it cannot explore. It cannot conduct first contact. It cannot sustain a crew's psychological health over years in deep space. It is optimized for war, and that optimization makes it useless for the missions Starfleet officially prioritizes. So the Defiant remains an outlier. It is deployed to Deep Space Nine, where its limitations are acceptable because the station provides the habitation and logistical support the ship lacks. The Federation builds one class of warship and assigns it to a fixed location, proving that its doctrine cannot sustain a dedicated war fleet. This constraint becomes catastrophic during the Dominion War. Starfleet enters the conflict with a fleet designed for exploration, policing, and limited border skirmishes. The Galaxy class, the Nebula class, the Excelsior class, all are pressed into fleet combat roles they were never optimized for. Galaxy-class vessels take casualties in nearly every major engagement. The Odyssey is destroyed in the first encounter with the Jem'Hadar. The USS Malinche is disabled and boarded. The USS Valiant, a Defiant class under cadet command, is obliterated attempting to destroy a Dominion battleship. Starfleet suffers sustained losses because its ships are designed to survive isolated encounters, not sustained fleet warfare. Damage control systems are built for endurance under sporadic fire, not continuous bombardment. Tactical systems are calibrated for defensive engagements, not offensive fleet maneuvers. Crew training emphasizes diplomacy and scientific problem-solving, not massed fire coordination and battle damage assessment under combat conditions. Starfleet adapts, but adaptation requires time, resources, and loss. The Federation commissions new ship classes mid-war. The Akira class, the Sovereign class, the Norway class, the Steamrunner class. Each design shifts toward dedicated combat capability. Torpedo launchers are multiplied, phaser arrays are enlarged, armor plating is thickened, saucer profiles are reduced, nacelle configurations are tightened, the aesthetic language shifts. These ships still retain exploration capability. They still carry science labs, diplomatic facilities, and crew quarters suitable for long deployments. But the balance has changed. The institutional pressure that once prioritized scientific instrumentation and diplomatic presentation now prioritizes survivability and firepower. The war forces Starfleet to admit, through design, that the dual mandate cannot be sustained under existential threat. The ships begin to look less like embassies and more like what they always were, instruments of policy backed by force. But the Federation does not abandon the aesthetic entirely. The Sovereign class, launched during the war, retains the smooth hull language, the visible bridge, the swept-back nacelles. It is sleeker, more aggressive, but still unmistakably Starfleet. The Enterprise participates in the Battle of Sector 001 against the Borg, engages Sonnar vessels in the Briar Patch, and confronts Romulan forces in the neutral zone. It wins these engagements not through overwhelming force, but through tactical flexibility, crew initiative, and the same redundancy principles that defined the Constitution class a century earlier. The Sovereign class is more capable in combat, but it is not a pure warship. It still carries families, still conducts scientific missions, still serves as a diplomatic platform. The design language still communicates Federation values, even as those values are tested by the reality of sustained warfare. The shape evolves, but the compromise remains. During the war, Starfleet loses more than 400 ships in major engagements. The Second Battle of Deep Space Nine, the First Battle of Chintoka, the Battle of Cardassia. Entire wings are destroyed. Veteran crews are killed. Ships that survived decades of exploration missions are obliterated in minutes. The losses are not evenly distributed. Older classes suffer disproportionately. Excelsior-class vessels, designed in an era of relative peace, are outmatched by Jem'Hadar attack fighters. Miranda-class ships, already obsolete, are pressed into service and destroyed in waves. The newer classes survive longer, but they still take casualties. The institutional assumption that any Starfleet vessel can handle any mission collapses under the operational reality that specialized threats require specialized responses. The war proves that the Federation's ship design philosophy is structurally vulnerable to sustained peer conflict. The Borg provide the clearest test case. A Galaxy-class starship encounters a Borg cube at Wolf 359. The fleet assembled to stop the cube includes 40 starships, representing multiple classes and decades of design evolution. The Borg destroy 39 of them. The Enterprise D arrives after the battle and finds debris fields, wrecked hulls, and no survivors. The engagement lasts minutes. The Borg adapt to every frequency, every tactic, every weapon configuration. They ignore shields, cut through armor, and assimilate damaged vessels. The Federation loses not because its ships are poorly designed, but because they are designed for a threat model that does not include an enemy with perfect adaptability, overwhelming firepower, and no interest in negotiation. The shape of Starfleet vessels is optimized for conflicts where diplomacy remains possible, even under fire. Against the Borg, diplomacy is irrelevant. The cube does not care about political signaling. It does not interpret hull geometry as a gesture of peaceful intent. It does not hesitate because a ship carries families. It analyzes, adapts, and destroys. The Federation's design philosophy, built on deterrence through visible capability and reassurance through non-aggressive aesthetics, fails completely. The only effective response is the Defiant class, a ship designed without regard for exploration mandates, without families aboard, without the institutional compromises that define every other Starfleet vessel. The Defiant survives encounters with the Borg, not because it is more powerful, but because it is more focused. It has no systems that do not contribute to combat effectiveness. It has no design elements intended to reassure or signal. It is built to fight, and that clarity of purpose makes it effective where more capable ships fail. But the Federation cannot build a fleet of Defiants. The resource cost is prohibitive. The crew sustainability is inadequate. The diplomatic cost is unacceptable. A fleet of pure warships would force the Federation to abandon its institutional identity. Member worlds would object. Pacifist factions would withdraw support. Rival powers would cite the fleet as evidence that the Federation was always an aggressive military hegemon in disguise. The political cost of honesty is higher than the tactical cost of compromise. So the compromise continues. The ships remain dual purpose. The families stay aboard. The design language remains calibrated to communicate peaceful intent while concealing lethal capability. The Federation continues to build vessels that look like embassies and fight like cruisers, hoping that the next war will allow time for adaptation, that the next enemy will be vulnerable to deterrence, and that the contradiction at the heart of Starfleet's mission will never be tested past the breaking point. The Dominion War tests it. The Federation survives, but the survival comes at the cost of building what it always refused to build, a fleet optimized for war. The Akira class, the Defiant class, the Prometheus class, with its multi-vector assault mode, all represent departures from the design philosophy that shaped the Constitution, the Galaxy, the Ambassador. These ships are not compromises. They are acknowledgments that the dual mandate cannot be sustained under existential threat, that the political fiction of a peaceful exploration fleet cannot survive contact with enemies who do not share the Federation's assumptions about diplomacy, restraint, and proportional response. The shape of the fleet begins to tell a different story. After the war, the Federation faces a choice. It can revert to the pre-war design philosophy, building ships that prioritize exploration and scientific research, accepting that those ships will be vulnerable in the next conflict. Or it can continue building combat-optimized vessels, accepting the political and institutional costs of admitting that Starfleet is, fundamentally, a military organization. Canon does not resolve this choice cleanly. The Sovereign class continues in service. The Defiant class is replicated. The Intrepid class, designed before the war, remains in production. The fleet becomes a mix of design philosophies, each class representing a different institutional compromise, a different balance between exploration mandates and defensive requirements. But the aesthetic language remains. Federation ships still have smooth hulls, visible bridges, balanced nacelle configurations. They still look like embassies. The saucer sections are still wide, the viewports still visible, the profiles still calibrated to communicate non-aggression. The design language does not change because the political requirement does not change. The Federation cannot afford to look like a military power, even as it builds a military fleet. The ships must continue to signal peaceful intent, even as they mount weapons capable of glassing planets, even as they participate in fleet actions that kill millions, even as they enforce borders, blockade systems, and project power across the galaxy. The shape is not idealism. The shape is institutional necessity under constraint. Every curve, every nacelle placement, every saucer diameter reflects a decision made under competing pressures. Exploration mandates demand habitable volume, scientific instrumentation, and endurance. Defensive requirements demand redundancy, firepower, and damage control. Political signaling demands visibility, non-aggression, and reassurance. Treaty obligations limit weapons placement, restrict patrol zones, and constrain tactical options. Resource scarcity forces choices between capability and coverage, between specialized effectiveness and general flexibility. The ships that emerge from these pressures are not expressions of hope. They are solutions to an impossible optimization problem built by an institution that refuses to choose between its ideals and its survival. The Federation wants to be a peaceful civilization. It wants to explore, to discover, to diplomacy its way through conflicts. But it exists in a galaxy where the Klingons respect only strength, where the Romulans probe every weakness, where the Borg assimilate without negotiation, and where the Dominion will destroy anything that resists. The ships must be capable of violence while appearing incapable of aggression. They must be survivable without appearing militarized. They must communicate values while preparing for war. This is the mechanism beneath the familiar silhouette. The smooth hulls are not optimism. They are deterrence architecture. The balanced profiles are not aesthetic preference. They are redundancy distribution. The wide saucers are not idealistic excess. They are damage control, compartmentalization. Every element that looks like hope is also a tactical compromise. Every design choice that signals peace is also a preparation for conflict. The Federation builds ships that look the way they do because it has no other option. The shape is the only way to satisfy every institutional pressure simultaneously. It is the only configuration that allows Starfleet to be both what it claims and what it must be. The official story is that Federation ships are designed to inspire. The mechanism is that they are designed to survive. The surface reading is idealism. The structural truth is constraint management. The familiar silhouettes are not monuments to optimism. They are maps of an institutional contradiction that the Federation cannot resolve and will not abandon. The ships look the way they do because the Federation cannot afford to build what it needs and cannot admit what it has built. The design language is a political performance, staged in titanium and uranium, repeated across every ship class for a century, because the performance is the only thing preventing the contradiction from becoming a crisis. The shape of a starship is the shape of a lie the Federation tells itself, and the galaxy every time a hull leaves dry dock. Not because the Federation is dishonest, but because the truth would unravel the political consensus that holds it together. The ships must look peaceful. The ships must be capable of war. Both requirements are absolute. The design reconciles them by hiding the second inside the first, by wrapping military capability in the visual language of diplomacy, by building embassies that can burn solar systems if required. This is not a flaw in Federation design philosophy. This is Federation design philosophy.